Welcome to Syncro 101. To start off with, we're going to come to the More and Admin. Depending on if you've set up your tabs differently, your admin might be over here in the corner, but for mine, I do have to go to the More and Admin, and for most people, that's going to look like. A little FYI for you is you'll notice that there's a lot of blank space when I'm using up my whole screen. You can use up a little bit more space by coming to your name and going to enable full screen. When you do that, it then uses up the whole screen. So for today, we're going to open that up completely. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger too. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is the account settings. So you can come down to your account profile. And here is where your main account settings are. So you'll notice that this is where you're going to claim your name. This is what I have here. When we look at the templates, you'll notice that that's also where anytime we use the tag account_name, that this is the name that's going to be auto-populated in like your emails and your templates, etc., PDFs, and all of that. You can create a custom logo here. Or add one, sorry, not create, but add one in. And when you do that, again, that's something that will be on templates automatically. And I'll show you some things around that when we get to the templates. The email address you claim here is the one that we're going to be using to communicate with you. So this is not a user, this is actually your account email address. So we might be sending you alerts and information, things like that. So make sure that this is an address that we can communicate with you on. Go ahead and put in your address information, phone information as you wish. Then last thing here is your subdomain. So if you are working with support at any point and they ask for your subdomain, you can find that here, but you can also find it in the URL. You can change this at any time. If you do that, make sure to update any URLs that you have out in the wild. The next thing to look at here are the business hours. Here is where you can set the business hours. You can add in calendars as well. You do not have to enable business hours, but you can. And if you do, there are going to be some settings that we look at later that are going to say things like only inside business hours, only outside business hours. So if you're going to be using any of those, you're definitely going to want to set this up here with your specific business hours. The next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at security groups and users. So these security groups are specific to you and your team, the users on the Syncro account, not to be confused with your customers and their portal. We'll talk about that later, but for right now, we're going to look at your security groups for your team. So we can come in here, you can create a new group. You'll see that there are some here that I've created here. One of them you'll notice is for a single customer. You can create a single customer group here. In general, for the all customer group security groups, there are 252 possible permissions. Something to note is not only does a single customer group only have permissions to that single customer, you'll notice here that the possible permissions are severely reduced. So just be very mindful on whether you want to be using a single customer group for a user or an all customer group. Here I have is the administrators. So they have almost everything, but maybe they don't, maybe you don't want them to have everything, but you absolutely can add in or remove all of these as appropriate for your environment. As soon as you have a few security groups set up, depending on how many users you're going to have, and you can always come back in here and add more or edit these ones, but you want to get at least one or two in here if you're going to be adding users, and then you're going to come in here to the users. And here is where you can add additional users. To be very, very clear, if you click add user, you got that little warning. At this point, I'm not yet charged, but if I add in all of this information and I click create user, At the point that I click create user, you are immediately charged for that additional user because Syncro is a per user licensing subscription. It will be prorated based on the billing period of your existing users. And then at your next billing period, you'll be charged the full rate. But do know that the minute you click on that create user, you will be charged the additional user. So because we don't want to add in another one for right now, let's just open up one and take a look. So we've got this one here. Walter here is a single customer user. So he can only have access to my customer called Haven. I've set up his full name, his email address, something about the email address. This is going to be their login. So you definitely need to make sure that it's a good, solid email address for them. Mobile number, I'm going to suggest if you're in North America that you put a 1 on. It just helps with SMS messaging if you're going to be setting that up for the notifications. We'll look at that here in just a minute, but you're definitely going to want that. Something to be aware of is, so right now, Walter is a single customer group user. I cannot promote him. Once somebody is in a single customer group, they cannot become an all customer group. You can demote somebody who was in an all customer group to a single customer, but you can't do it the other way. So because we can't do it the other way, I'm going to hop into Doug here. So you can take a look here. And we're going to add, I'm going to talk about some of these options down here. So you'll notice that this user is not assigned to any group, but they are a global admin. Even if I come in here and I tell it maybe, let's put him in the everything group and make him a global admin. Even in the everything group, that is really not one of those 252 permissions, but there is still a whole bunch of things that somebody who is not a global admin cannot get to, even if they have permissions to everything. As an example, somebody who is not a global admin cannot get to most of these settings. Even if they're, say, in a report, asset audit. So somebody who is not a global admin, even if they have permissions to everything, they can get to this report, but because customize is a setting, they cannot get to that. Those are just examples of the difference between somebody who has permissions to everything and somebody who is also a global admin. Also to be aware of is if you put somebody in 2 different groups, which we'll let you do, we will default to the group that has the most permissions. So in this example, if this user was in the accounting group and the everything, they would actually default to everything. But if we also made them a global admin, they would actually have the permissions for everything, the global admin. Next things to look at here is if you put somebody in an all customer group and you're like, oh no, I really want them in a single one, you can add that here. Again, you can demote people. You cannot promote them into an all customer. When you no longer need this user, you can disable their account. They will still be associated to like tickets they created and things like that. They just can't log in anymore. And that's when your billing will stop for them. So on your next bill, you will see a reduced number of users. You can also disallow them from adding public ticket comments and emailing. I don't see a lot of people using this, but do know that it exists. And then the last thing here is to require this user to use the time clock. If you enable this, what that means is when they log in, they have to come up here, do their time clock, and add in their time clock information. If you want to be able to track your users' logins and logouts, you can come in here, have them do the time clock, and they would log in every day. And then we have a report. I've actually got my reports here. We've got a tech time report. Oops, tech. Yep, ticket time by technician. And then we also have a time clock report. So you can use both of those to kind of track what your technicians are doing when they're logged in, and then the ticket time report tells you what tickets they worked on. So that is everything about the security groups and the users. So I'm going to hop it back over here to our more admin. So the next thing we're going to look at here is notifications. So here in the notification center, we can come in here and create a new notification set. And really what a notification set is, you're telling Syncro, when a thing happens in Syncro, I want to be notified. So in here, you're going to want to give it a name that's meaningful to you. You're going to want to select the users for this notification set. And you might have a different notification set for each user, or you might have one notification set for all your users. It really depends on who wants to get what information, who wants to be notified about what types of information or activity in Syncro. So for this example, I'm just going to do me. So you'll notice that this list is only the people who are users on the account, but maybe I want to have somebody else like my accountant or something else like that. Maybe I don't have a user who is my accountant, but I still want them to be aware of when something gets paid. For example, you could add in their email here. Also, we can send SMS messages to people who are not users. Here is a big place where I've noticed that if you're in North America, you're going to definitely want to put in the 1. In some places, Syncro doesn't seem to need it as much as other places. But so just an FYI, if you don't add in a 1 somewhere and the SMS message isn't sending, try adding in a 1 if you're in North America. So as we look down here, we'll see all the different event types. So you'll see that almost everything that happens in Syncro, we have an option to let you know about. Something to be aware of is like, so we come down here and we say, I want to know when a ticket is created for anyone. This means, oh, not sure why it hopped there. Every single ticket that gets created will take the action that you tell it to. If you want only specific kinds of tickets, we're going to do that via automation. We'll look at that later. So but I really want you to be aware that this is a global setting. So because I've set me as the user who's getting alerted, and I want to know when tickets are created, every ticket that's created, I will get an action if I select this. So those are all the event types that you can get notifications on. Now let's look at the mode of communication. So we can get an email. So maybe when an SNMP gets enabled, I want an email about it. This will either be the one for the user or the additional email here. I can get an SMS, which will be my phone number or the phone number here. In-app notify. What happens is if you add this in, if the person is logged in, if I am logged in when the event happens, I'll get a little pop-up that says, a ticket is created and a SNMP asset is added, something like that. But even if I'm not logged in or if I don't address it, when I do log in, I can come to my name and notifications, and it'll show up here as well in this list. The next option here is mobile push notification. What this will do is if I have the mobile app installed on my device, it will push to that mobile device. And then depending on the notification settings on that device, I could get like a banner or a sound, something like that when one of these events happens. The last item here is a webhook. I usually see this used with Teams, Microsoft Teams, but not always. And if you're going to be using this, you just put the URL here. You can add in as many events as you like with as many types of notifications. So maybe it is super important for me to know when tickets are created. So I want all of these. It's really important if tickets are due in 15 minutes. So I want a text message on that. I want to know when tickets are resolved, but it's not crazy important that I don't need to address. So I could do something like this. So again, you can have as many modes with as many different types as you like. So that is it on the notification set. Not seeing any questions yet. I'm going to move on to the next setting that I want to talk about, which is the templates. So still here, over here in my admin, I'm going to come down here to PDF and email templates. in this screen, estimates, invoices, those are the PDF templates. Here are email templates, and we also have our SMS templates. So for just our conversation today, we're going to hop into the email templates. And because we're going to talk about this one a lot over this training, I want to look at the ticket autoresponder email. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to preview it so that we have this up. So whenever a ticket is created, if you have told Syncro you want to send the autoresponder, this is the email that they get. This is the one that I have configured. But say I'm like, oh, I don't like the verbiage on that. I can come in here and I can edit this. And this is our template editor. So I could come in here and I can maybe change some stuff. I want those on the same line. I can add in any of this. So basically, this is where you can edit all of your outbound stuff. There are some places that we have, like the after business hours autoresponder is not in here, but I will show you when we get there how to get to that template as well. And the last thing in the admin I want to go over is reporting. So here's our reports. So we looked at this asset audit report for a moment, just a little bit ago. And so I want to show you something. I'm just going to run this report on all types. So I've got this report here that tells me some stuff about an asset. So I've got some details here. There are going to be some reports that you can then also schedule. And what this means is you can tell Syncro, like every month or week or however often you want to do that, you can send that customer's report to them, or you can send a copy to yourself. So know that you absolutely can schedule some of the reports, not all of them, but many of them. And then we have kind of two different types of reports. So we have this detailed report, but if you want more of a summary, I'm going to hop back here into my reports, we do have the executive summary report. So that same customer, I've got my custom executive report here, and I'm going to run it. These executive summaries are more of a summary, as the name indicates. So we've got these like graphical representations, totals, where it's not as detailed. So I just want you to be aware that there are the two different types, detailed and summaries, and some of them are schedulable. These executive summaries are also schedulable, most of them. Leads is basically the inbox. So depending on how we configure this, you may or may not need to come in here and manually check things. I'm going to show you a bunch of ways so that you don't have to. My suggestion is even if you set up everything to happen automatically, you come in here periodically just to make sure that nothing got missed, because it might really upset a customer to email in and not get the help that they need. So back here in our admin, we're going to scroll all the way down near the bottom here, and we're going to start by looking at the mailboxes. To set up a mailbox, you can come here to your new mailbox. You're going to give it a name that's meaningful to you. And then you're going to tell it the email that you're going to be getting inbound emails from. So this is the address that right now your customers are emailing. And so it might be like support at whatever your company is, or help at whatever your company is. So we're going to do help at kna.kna for right now. And without even looking at the rest of these settings, let's just go ahead and click create mailbox. And when I come back in there to edit it, now I have this mailbox. So when I created that, Syncro went out and created a mailbox for this email address. So now I'm going to go to this address and I'm going to set up a forwarding rule to this address, so that whenever anybody emails my help at KNA, it automatically forwards to this mailbox so that I can address it in Syncro. Now that we have that forwarding set up, we're getting ready to go. Now we need to tell Syncro, when I get an email from this address, what do I want to do about it? So I can tell it, I never want to create tickets. If you tell it never, there are some other settings we're going to look at that may help you automate some of that ticket creation. But again, if anything gets missed, it'll end up here in leads, and you'll want to come here and check this out periodically. The other option is to always create a ticket. So one of your customers emails this address, this email address forwards to this box, and now you've told Syncro, for anything coming in from here, create a ticket. So we're going to match the email address on the ticket, the email that emailed this address, match it to a contact that you have. If it can't match to a contact, it will create a contact or customer, and then it will create the ticket for the customer at that email address. The other option is only for existing. So it's going to try to match that inbound email address to an existing customer. If it can't find it, it'll probably show up here in leads. If it can find it, it creates the ticket under the existing customer. Now, depending on which setting you have here, you can also add to send a lead or ticket autoresponder. So if you have it never, it's probably going to be a lead. So they'll get the lead autoresponder that says, we got your email, we'll let you know. If you have the ticket responder and you say, tell it always, it's going to create the ticket and they'll get the ticket autoresponder email. Here's one of those places where we want business hours enabled if we're going to use this. So we have this enable after hours autoresponder. So if you enable this, what that means is if somebody emails in outside of those business hours that you set, they will get an email saying it's currently outside of our business hours. That is not one of the default templates that we looked at. If you want to set this up, you're going to need to go in and write your own email, and you can do that from your autoresponder overrides. Those templates are in here. Once you've set all this up, until you activate that mailbox, it will just be an inbound. When it's just an inbox, anybody who's sending into this address, it'll create tickets or not, depending on your settings. Then if you send emails out, like via a ticket or an invoice or something like that, the address that it's actually going to be showing up as sending from is the email address that we have created for you. And it is not that RSM box big long one. It actually will be your subdomain at syncroemail.com. But you might be like, I don't want my customers to see that I'm sending this from Syncro email. So you can then make it an outbound mailbox like I've done here. And what that does is we actually then spoof your address. It's still coming from your subdomain at syncroemail.com, but on their end, it looks like it's coming from the address that you've set up as your outbound, which in 99% of the cases is great. That way they don't see that, but everything works out. There are some providers out there that see that we're spoofing, that ends up marking us as spam. So if your customers are like, hey, I'm not getting your emails, go and check their spam folders. It's very possible that you're using the outbound email and that their provider is seeing that we're spoofing. And it's like, oh, we don't like spoofs, so make it spam. To get around that, we're going to hop back over here. Oops, nope, let's hop back into admin and come down to the bottom here. To get around that, you can set up SMTP. So if you have an SMTP server, you can come in here. This does not affect inbound emails at all. This only sets up your outbound email so that it doesn't come from Syncro email, and you don't have the spam problem because we're spoofing. So you can absolutely set this up and it'll get around all of that. My suggestion is if you set this up, test. Maybe try toggling these off and on if you're getting communication failures, things like that. But you absolutely set up SMTP as your outbound. The only real downside to using your own SMTP is I'm going to hop over here for a second, go into my reporting. In reports, all the way down at the bottom, we have this communication summary, which is all outbound communications. So emails sent out, SMS messages sent out. This only reports on what we do. So if you have SMTP set up, we can't report on this because this is your SMTP server. So if you want nice, good reporting, you're going to want to stick with the Syncro stuff. But if you trust your SMTP server and you don't seem to have any issues, you won't need the reporting. So don't worry about that, but know that that's a thing. The last thing with emails is we do have email rules. And really what the email rules do is they say, anything coming in from this domain, I want to create a ticket automatically. So you can create a new email rule here. We're actually just going to look at one that I already have set up here. So anything coming in from acme.com, I've told it, create the ticket and assign it to this customer. So if Sally at Acme sends in an email, it'll automatically assign. If Joe at Acme does, automatically assign. You can then tell it, I want to always assign it to an existing contact. You don't have to, but you know that you can. You can assign it to a specific technician on your side. You can assign it to the mailbox. And then this last option here. So you saw that Sally is a contact. So Sally emails in, ticket's automatically going to get created under her contact information. But if Joe emails in, Joe does not exist yet. You can see that because we don't have Joe as an option. If Joe doesn't exist and we have these current settings, it's going to create the ticket under the main customer because the contact doesn't exist. We can enable this option here to auto create the contact under them. So when Joe emails in, Syncro will look and be like, oh, Joe does not exist yet. It'll create the contact for Joe and assign the ticket to him. So before we look at actually creating other customers, let's look at our customer settings. So in here, in our admin, under customers, we do have the preferences. We are not going to look at each one of these settings, but there are some that I definitely want to make sure that you are aware of. So the first one is, if you want everybody to have SMS by default, you can enable this. Even if you disable this, you can enable SMS on individual customers and contacts. This just does it for everybody automatically. If you want to enable multiple contacts on customers. So if we're looking at, let me hop in here to a customer. So right now, this is the main customer, and you can see that they have one contact. If you don't want contacts at all, if all of your customers are going to be like single individuals or single businesses that aren't going to have additional contacts, you can disable this. But for most of our users, they do want to enable the multiple contacts. So that's just an FYI there. If you want to be able to require any fields when somebody is creating a new customer, you can do that here. I'm going to hop down to enable the prepay hours. So there is a way that you can tell Syncro, and we'll look at some of that as we go along here, around allowing prepaid hours. So what that does is, in my example later, we're going to look at if somebody buys 10 hours of prepaid labor from me a month, I give them a discount. And then every time I create an invoice that has labor on it, it removes from the any prepaid hours that they have here. So if you want to be able to do that, you have to enable that here. I'm definitely going to encourage you to hop in here at some other time and look at each one of these individually. A little something to be aware of is you'll notice that in most cases, we're used to enabling something with a checkbox. Notice that we have some verbiage around like disable. We're going to look at some later that say do not. So just be mindful, if I click this, I'm really disabling this. So just be aware of that when you're looking at settings. So once you have the settings that you like, we're going to hop over here to customers. So we looked at when you get an inbound email, if you tell it to always create a ticket, Syncro is also going to automatically create a customer because Syncro is customer centric. So we don't do almost anything without a customer. So if you want tickets and invoices and assets and all of that, they have to be assigned to a customer. So you can come in here and in our reports, if you have existing customers from some other piece of software, you can come in here and here is our customer import, and you can import, you go ahead and grab a template, make sure that you have all the data in there per our template, and then you can use the report to import customers. Say you've got a brick and mortar, or you get a call from somebody you've never worked with before and you need to create a new customer. You can come into your customer module, click on new customer, and here's where we're going to set up our new customer. So for this example, if you're following along, let's come in here and create a customer, and I'm going to pick Bugs Bunny because it amuses me. And Bugs Bunny works for Warner Brothers. And his email address, you don't have to add an email address in for your customers, but if you're going to enable their portal later, I am going to suggest that you do. Portals do not require email addresses, but it'll just create the login in a more secure way. So I just always suggest that. We actually do a little bit of checking here and see, it'll be like, wait a minute, that's not right. It actually does some checking, but I really want an address that probably doesn't exist for my testing. The next option here is the phone. You can add in as many phone numbers as you want. If you are going to be sending them SMS messages, their phone number has to be under the mobile phone type. Even if this phone number here, you have the phone type, even if this is a mobile number, Syncro will not acknowledge it and so won't offer you the SMS availability. So definitely, if you're going to SMS, make sure that the type is mobile. Down here, we have the tax rate. Even though you might have a product that is taxable or not taxable, Syncro won't know what tax to apply unless the customer has an applied tax rate. Then the next two items here are the portal user and the remote. Those are actually a bigger conversation. So we're gonna skip those for a little bit. We're gonna hop over here to addresses. You can add in address. You can also add in other sites and addresses. These then can be applied to different contacts or invoices, tickets, etc. You don't have to add in additional addresses, but know that you can. We saw that I have my SMS enabled by default. So this is enabled. I can disable it. Billing emails are those coming from invoices. Marketing emails are those coming from the mailer. And report emails those are the ones that we looked at that you can schedule. They can opt in or out for any of those. This setting to no email of any kind will override anything else you do. Before we send any email, we check the email address that's being sent to. We see if there's no email of any kind assigned to it. And if there is, we simply will not send to that address. If the customer has another email address that they want all outbound emails to go to, we can add this notification email address here. So maybe Bugs's boss also wants an email but doesn't want to be a contact. You can add that in there. This additional invoice CC email addresses. Generally, the way that I see this used is that the accounting department They don't want to be a contact. They aren't the main contact, but they would like to get a copy of every invoice we send out. So you can absolutely add in something here. Again, I usually see it as the accounting department. Then we have this additional ticket matching email. And what this is, so I told you when we get an inbound email, we'll look to see if that email address exists in your customer database. So what we're looking for is this email. But maybe sometimes Bugs emails from his home address. So we can match to this too. So you can put in another email address so that if they email from either one, we're going to create the ticket under this customer. We can add in default estimate templates, ticket templates, invoices, or invoice terms. I've got this terms here that any invoices that are over 10 days old, they get charged $10 every 10 days. And once you have the customer set up the way that you want, you can then create this customer. And you'll see that I have created this customer successfully. Now we're going to hop over to one of my existing customers because they have more data in them. So let's look at the anatomy of a customer. So we have this overview here. They currently don't owe me anything. This is how much I've totally invoiced them in my lifetime relationship with them. Come down here, there's some other basic information about the customer themselves. Any appointments I have with them, reminders about them, if I've applied any warranties. I can add in notes, like I know that this person likes chocolate, so every time I go visit them, I take them some chocolate. Then we have attachments here. We have a maximum of 10 attachments on an item with a maximum of 100 megabytes on any individual file. And over here on the right, you'll see that we've got a summary of all of our kind of relationship with them. We've got all the leads that were created off of them. There are additional sites and addresses that I can set up. So I could have set that up when I was creating the customer, or I can come in here and click new and add another one. We've got their stored payment profile, the different contracts that might be associated to them, tickets, etc. Then along the top here, we have our tabs. These communications, kind of like we looked at that communication report that is all outbound communications for my account. Communications here is all outbound communications with them. And just to be really clear, we say it's basically communications with them. So that can happen via email. It can happen via SMS. It also can happen in a ticket if you select a public comment, because public means that they could see it on their portal. Even if their portal is not enabled, it's public, so it is a communication with them. So anything that could be viewable by them, so an outbound email, an SMS, or a public comment, will be here in communications. We're going to skip past the contacts here because, again, that's got some stuff in there that we really need to dig into. So we're going to hop past that for just a moment. We're going to go to credentials. The way that I usually see credentials used is you might have a customer who has created a user account on their server for you. So that way, if you need to do any work on their server, you can just log in with your own login. You can go ahead and put that information in here. We have a chat history. I deleted all my chat history, so I wish I hadn't done that so that you guys could see what a chat history looks like. The history with all chats for this customer, regardless of contact, will be in here. In Syncro 102, we're going to talk more about backups. But my suggestion for you around kind of starting that off, if you're going to be using backups, you're going to want to come into the customer and decide the destinations that you want those backups to go to. And at each customer, you can add in multiple destinations. So you might have, like, so as an example, I'm going to be having all of my backups for Haven PD going to the Storage by Syncro, which is our cloud storage. You can add in like a NAS device or a local hard drive, something like that, to back up to. So maybe for this customer, for all of their servers, I want to back up to my NAS device, but for all of their workstations, I'm going to do it to the cloud storage. You can absolutely do something like that. So you set the destinations at the customer level. In Syncro 102, we're going to look at how to enable backups and also how to decide what you want to back up on a per asset basis. If you have more questions about backups, definitely go ahead and grab our documentation in our knowledge base, because I'm going to go over like the setting up of, but that has some more information around like deeper configurations. The last tab we have here is the history tab. This does not log every single piece of information, but it does have some nice history. So here you might kind of come in here and be like, oh, when did they change their name? Oh, that's right, because she got married and I want to know that date. Or maybe you might be like, hey, who gave them more hours? Oh, well, Carla did on this date. So there's a brief history here. It doesn't log everything, but it's a pretty good history. We'll hop back in here to contacts. On a customer, if we enable the multiple contacts in the settings like we looked at, you can add in multiple contacts here. So to add a contact, you just click on new and it will create a new contact. And you can go ahead and add in all of their information. You can give them one of the custom addresses. Again, just like on the main contact, if you're going to be enabling the portal user, I am going to suggest that you add in the email address. It just helps with security. You can add in a mobile number. You can add in a direct report. You'll notice that we have the option for the matching address. So that is the address that if they email from their work address or their home address, for example, we can match off either of those to create a ticket for them. We have the options if they want to opt in or out for billing emails, which is the invoices, marketing, or report emails. And then what I really want to talk about is the portal user and the remote access. And in some places, these are tied. So let's talk about that. We're going to hop back into the admin. So more admin. And I opened up this in another window. So first we want to talk about the permissions for the portal. Originally, we talked about security groups and your users. That's you and your users. The portal user permission groups are for the customers and what they can see when they log into their portal information. You'll notice if you haven't done anything in the portal permission groups and you're following along, that you probably just have the limited portal group and a non-portal users group. You can come in here and add a new one. If we hop into one of the ones that I have already, I'm going to just edit this, and you can see that we have a lot of these options here. These are significantly less than, say, your users in their security groups. And these are just those things that a customer might want to see about their account. So as an example here, so I've got one here called Customers Tech Support. So maybe my customer has a tech support person that's going to log in periodically to kind of see what's going on with the tickets. So we want them to be able to see the assets. And part of what's really important about having these settings is if you're going to make them a remote user, we'll talk about that here in a minute, then they have to have viewability to at least their assets, if not all of the assets. And we'll actually hop in and look at a portal here in a minute. But if they're going to have remote ability, one or the other of these settings absolutely has to be enabled. Then you might want to give them like view to tickets, et cetera, like that. Here is where you set the permissions for the portal. As an FYI, if you have a customer or a contact who has not been assigned a portal, so you have not enabled the portal for them, they are automatically in the non-portal users group. So depending on what you want people to be able to see, if they are not assigned a group, you may want to come in here and change this. So this is important because, as you can see here, I have said anybody who has not been assigned a portal has permissions to see everything. Why this is important, we're going to hop back to this email. Almost all of our email templates have this line on it. So what this means is I'm going to send out this email when somebody gets a ticket created for them. And again, it's in a lot of the templates. So it's not just the autoresponder on new tickets. And this online portal link, if they click it, if they are in the non-portal users group for my users, they'll be able to see everything. So you may want to come in here and be like, so for people I have not assigned a portal to, maybe you don't want them to see anything. So you can come in here and you can negate all of the possible permissions and just take away all of their permissions. You're welcome to do that. Because if you don't want them to have access, anybody who you have not assigned a portal group to, you can go into all of the templates and remove this line so that not only if they click on it, they don't see anything, they don't even have anything to know about. So I just want you to be aware that there is this non-portal user group that is assigned to anybody who is not assigned a portal. So hopping back over to my customer, let's look at Nate here. So Nate has the portal assigned to him. He is in the customer's tech support group. I can require MFA. By default, the portal login is their email address. I can change this, or if they don't have an email, it'll randomly assign them a string of characters. I've enabled this person as a portal user. Another way to look at them to kind of get some more details is in the overview of this customer. I can scroll down to my portal users and we can see Nate here. I can assign Nate a password if I want to. I can also require MFA if I don't want to do it at the contact level. And if I do this, maybe I want to also change their the group they're in. You can view them from either place once you have enabled them as a portal user. You'll see that Nate also has remote access. Let's see what that looks like. So I've enabled their portal and I've enabled remote access. So I'm going to come in here to my other window and I'm going to go to my portal. So now we're pretending that I am the customer, Nate, with Haven PD. So I'm going to sign in here as Nate. We looked at the customer's tech support permissions. So we can see assets, customer stuff, ticket stuff. So when we're logged in as Nate, yep, we can see ticket stuff, the attachments, if there were any on these tickets. And then we have this asset information. Now me as Nate, if I want to, maybe this Lenovo has been having issues, I can remote into those. And that's why we have to have the asset permissions enabled for anybody who has remote ability. Because if I negated this view, even if I made Nate a remote user, he has no way to get to those assets. So just be aware that if you're going to enable remote access, they have to be a portal user and they have to have access to the assets. Also to be aware of, the remote ability comes absolutely free with your subscription for you and your users. If you enable it on your contacts, that is an additional $5 per contact fee. So if I enabled it for all of the contacts for Haven here, that would be an additional $25 that I would be charged. Right now, I can tell you that only 2 of mine have remote access enabled. I happen to know that because I've done it. So that I have an additional $10 a month for remote access for my customers. If you have additional questions on that, we do have some documentation on when that becomes chargeable. So really what that is the minute I click this button and hit save, the billing starts. And I see a question here. So if just one client contact wanted remote access to all 200 of the other machines, it would be an additional $5 a month since it is one user. That is correct. So it is per contact, and then you can make it so depending on how you set things up, like, so let's come back here. If you wanted them to have access to all of the assets, all 200 of the assets, you would set that up here, but it's the single charge for the single contact, so $5. That is how you set up the portal users, their permissions, as well as remote access for your customers. Let's look at our ticket preferences. So here in admin, scroll down, we've got our ticket preferences. You'll notice that the ticket preferences, once we add in the additional settings, there's a ton of ticket preferences. We are definitely not going through all of these today, but there are some that I really, really want you to be aware of and get you some information on. So the first one here is enable ticket resolved emails. What this does is if you enable this, every time a ticket gets resolved, the customer will get an email saying your ticket has been resolved. So you can absolutely enable that or disable it as you like. You can enable due dates and set up when that is. Maybe you have a 2-hour SLA that you, 2-minute, you are super quick. 2-hour SLA on all of your customers. You can set that up that way so you can get all of the different notifications off that. Then these two are the next two that I want to talk about. On inbound emails, we can do some stuff around creating tickets or not. We also looked at the leads module. So sometimes stuff gets put in leads because it didn't automatically create a ticket off of it. Here is another option that you can enable so that I can tell it, I want to create tickets from leads all the time. But we have this qualifier here, if valid. And what if valid means is if in the lead, there is enough information for us to either match to a customer or create one. So if the lead is, say, from an inbound email, because it's an email, we at least know that we have the email address. So we're going to grab that email address. We're going to try to attach it to a customer. Does this customer exist? Oh, it does. We're going to create the ticket, easy peasy. But maybe that email address doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, we're going to actually read through the lead and see if there's a signature in there, because we need at least 2 data points to create a new customer. So data points include email addresses, name, business name, or phone number. So we need at least 2 of those. And we are smart enough to look through the lead and be like, oh, here's a signature. It's got their name, it's got their email address, it's got their phone number, it's got their business name. Boom, create a customer with that information. Now create the ticket under that customer. If the email, say, didn't have a signature, it just said like, need help, my machine won't boot, but there's no signature in there, it'll get stuck in leads because we don't have enough information to create the customer to create the ticket for. So if you have this enabled and you're like, I've got a bunch of stuff stuck in leads, look through those leads to see if we were able to parse that information. Another little thing to kind of be aware of is because we're parsing that we're parsing everything for signatures. If we got an email that was a forward of a forward, now we might have multiple signatures. So if we're trying to match to a customer or create one, Syncro does best guess around which of these signatures is the one that I need to be pulling data from. So if you're like, I got the email from Sally at Acme, but it attached it to Joe, and that's because Joe sent Sally an email and Sally forwarded it in. Know that that's a thing and that's possible. We do our best and it usually works okay. Similarly with SMS messages, if you have somebody who SMS'd in a request, there's no signature. So if the phone number exists, we can match it. If it doesn't, chances are good there's no signature in there, so it'll stay in leads until you do something with it. The next item here is the ticket time tracking. So what this does is I'm over here in a ticket. We're just going to grab a random ticket that doesn't have anything on it. Enabling the ticket time tracking module enables this labor log. So you can come in here and you can be like, okay, so I got this ticket and I want to do some work on it. So I'm going to pick my labor rate, research. I'm going to do some research. So I'm going to start my timer while I do that research. So we're going to let that run for a little bit. Another thing that the ticket time tracking can do is you can come in here and maybe I'm going to make a private note and say here, I reinstalled Office for this folks. And I can come down here and I can add in labor here as well. So I'm going to click on private. I'm going to pop back up here to my labor log, and you can see that that added automatically. Now, say I've done the research that I wanted to do. I'm going to stop my log here. And now I have, so I have mine set to default to always round up to 30 minutes. That's why it wasn't even a minute, but it went to 30. You'll notice that this is not charged. There is a difference between charged and not charged. You might want to charge all the time for labor, or you might just want to have it in here as a note. You'll come up to a ticket and see that, like in my here, I've got just those things that are charged. Sorry, lost my mouse. So if you want to be able to do this, you will need to enable the ticket time tracking module. And we're going to hop down, we're going to scroll down here. Some other things that I want to look at is this item right here, tickets do not email initial issue by default, as well as this ticket comments do not email comments by default. When you spun up Syncro, both of these were disabled because the language in them is do not. What this means is that we're actually going to do this thing. So this one is initial email initial issue by default. That is the ticket autoresponder. So it's going to send out an email that says, we got your ticket. Here's your ticket information. That happens automatically. If you find that you are either getting too many emails or not enough, or your customers are, you're going to want to look at all of these different settings that I've been showing you today to make sure that you have this set up in a way that is the way that you want it. It's really imperative that when you're coming through here and you're like, I do want them to send the email. Why I'm enabling this? Why is it not sending the email? It's because this actually to send the email, and you want this disabled. This ticket comments do not email comments by default. So if I come in here and I make a public note, that's basically a comment. So if I make a note here and I make a public note, if I have this disabled, this one right here, it's actually going to email and say, there's been a comment on your ticket. So that's what that does. With it disabled, that email does get sent. You'll see here we have this send ticket autoresponder for emailed in tickets. The difference between that and like the leads thing is you might have a website or website integration set up. So there might be leads in there that are not from emails. So you can specify for that you only want it sent for emailed in tickets versus like those things coming in via your website. So that's just something to be aware of. We're going to scroll down here. This option here. So we looked at the difference between charged and uncharged. And so we can say, when I get ready to close this ticket, I've got this uncharged labor. Syncro is asking, do you want a note that basically says, hey, you're resolving this ticket and there's a charge time. Do you want to charge it? So you can add that. You'll notice that I had to, when I added in my time here, I had to click the charge now. If you just want to charge everything by default, you can go ahead and enable that. Here is where I set that time for round up. You'll see that there are these other options if you want to add those. Then the last item here I want to show you is this customized text for ticket charges. So we're going to come in here and we see that like this labor here, there's some information here. I'm going to add in my random product, and the description on this is just boom, and we're going to say the price is the same amount. Oh, come on. And I'm going to add that line. So you'll see here that I've got the product and its description. When I make an invoice from this, I may want the invoice to have some custom information because the customer may not care about my description of the product, but they want to know what ticket it is from and when that charge happened. So as you can see here, I've told it the customized ticket charge says from ticket and that ticket date. So when I created the invoice, the description changed like on this random product, from boom to the ticket and this. So they know where that's coming from. You don't have to do that, but I see a lot of people use this because it makes things a little less confused for some customers. So know that it exists. Definitely encourage you to come in here and look at each one of these. And if you have questions about it, we have some documentation on this. And if you're like, wait a minute, what does this enable outtake form really do? And you don't like the way that it's described in the document, support will be happy to give you more details on that. But we aren't going to go through all of these. So those are just the main things that I want you to be aware of. So now that we have some settings set up, let's hop over to our tickets module. As you saw, we can create tickets automatically from inbound emails, even through like the leads in the website. But maybe you have somebody who's just walked in or they got you on the phone and you want to do it manually. You can come in here and you can create a new ticket. Again, we are customer centric, so we need to tell it the customer that we want to assign it to. We're going to create the ticket. We need to give it a title. We need to tell it the issue type. Complete issue description. You can add in more information here. You might want to have like more details around when it started, etc. You can tell Syncro whether you want it to email or not. If this customer had that setting to do not email for any emails, this would have been checked automatically. You'll see that it populated a due date for me. Because I'm the one creating the ticket, it's automatically assigned to me, but maybe I want to assign it to somebody else. Do I have a contact that I want to assign it to? Oh, I'm talking to Kilgore on the phone, so I'm going to assign it to him automatically. We can also add in additional emails because maybe Kilgore also wants Billy to get some of this information. Because I'm talking to them, I may want to be like, so we're good to proceed? And he says, yes, and we're good to go. You can pre-diagnose. I can assign an SLA. So here, if I assign an SLA, I will be, depending on my notification sets, I will be notified if I haven't communicated with the customer in 2 hours versus a due date, which is when I will resolve the ticket. So those are two separate things. I can add in custom fields, and then I can tell you right now that this customer doesn't have any assets, but because Kilgore's bringing me his laptop, I may want to create a new asset so that I have that in my records. It's not something that has the agent on it. I just want to be able to like track history off of it. Absolutely can do that. And once I've got everything set the way that I want to, I can create this ticket. And now I have this ticket. And so let's look at the anatomy of a ticket. So we have kind of the ticket information itself. So there is a difference between the ticket status. So where is this ticket at? And then we have the billing status. So where is it at with invoicing? Right now, this ticket has no charges, so it's not billable. There's no reason to invoice it. There's no charges. Once I add something, so let's say I'm going to add some labor in here. And I close this. And now it's saying that the invoice is required. It means that there's a charge on there that has been invoiced. We'll look at some more billing statuses here in a little bit. We're going to move on to the customer information. So what a customer or assigned contact is on this ticket. Any appointments that are specific to this ticket. We have attachments. Again, attachments, no more than 10 attachments. None of those can be over 100 megabytes. The labor log that we looked at, any relevant assets if we had them, communications. So I can email because I totally can email this person and email. So we've got all this history. This bar here, a lot of people like, that's one of the settings in the ticket preferences that we looked at. If you want this, some people don't like it. It's useless to them. I just want you to be aware that it exists. It also helps with the invoicing as well as the billing status here. Maybe you want to email a copy of this ticket. You can do it from here. or you can also split the ticket, resolve. There are all of these action options. So know that all of those things exist. And I want to go back and talk about the billing status. So we added an item and our billing status changed to invoice required. So you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to invoice. I think I'm mostly done here. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to make an invoice from this ticket. And for a little bit here, we're going to talk about invoicing and tickets kind of in tandem. So I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to see that that line item is here. If I go back to the ticket, my billing status is now invoiced. And so I'm talking to Kilgore and Kilgore's like, oh, shoot, I totally forgot I needed that random thing. So I'm going to add in another product here. It's added it in. And now my billing status is partial. You're like, oh, so now I need to add this. I can put back in here. I'm going to make an invoice again. It's going to ask me, do I want to add it to the existing invoice or create a new invoice? I'm going to come over here to add it to the existing because there's something else that I want to show you. So it doesn't automatically add it in. If you create an invoice and there are uncharged items for that customer, not necessarily just that ticket, but for that entire customer, you'll see this other pending ticket charges. In this case, it's one that I'm adding, but if maybe they had another ticket out there in the wild that I forgot to invoice, it'll also show up in here and I can come in here and add to invoice. All right, so back to our ticket. And if I actually come back over here, I'm going to add this to my invoice. And we head back to the ticket. And we refresh this. And it is invoiced again. I'm going to show you something here in just a minute. But I want you to notice that so this ticket, it has everything invoiced. All the charges on it have been invoiced. But it is not resolved. So now I'm going to come over to this invoice. I'm talking to Kilgore. Kilgore's like, yep, nope, we're good. Let me pay you. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take payment. And I've got a little test Stripe account. I'm going to put it in the wrong one. Oops. And I'm going to take payment. And one of the things that Syncro is going to try to do is it's saying, hey, there's a ticket that's assigned to this invoice that's not resolved. So I can tell it, go ahead and resolve it, or I can leave it open. But in most cases, you're probably done with the work and you're taking payment. You probably want to resolve it. So I wanted you to be aware of that. In looking at tickets, so we learned how to create them. Sometimes manually, you might want to do that. Sometimes automatically via like inbound emails. I've got 8 or so tickets in any given environment. You're probably going to have tons more. And you don't want to go into each one of these tickets every day and be like, where is this ticket at? Do I need to do anything? Am I supposed to be doing something? Am I waiting for the customer? So like, so I'm going to come over here to because I closed it. So let's go to Haven. So I've got this ticket and I'm like, hey, need screenshots. And I'm going to change this to waiting on customer. So I've asked them for some screenshots and I've changed the status. Now, I don't want to come in here every day and be like, did I get an email back? Did I get an email back? So we can automate a bunch of things for tickets. So we're going to come in here to more and admin. Ticket automation is one of my favorite portions of Syncro. And when we get into Syncro 102, we've also got this ability with alerts. But for today, we're going to talk about ticket automations. So we're going to come in here to our ticket automations. And here is where you can tell Syncro when a thing is true about a ticket, I want you to take some kind of action. So for my example today, I'm going to create a new ticket automation, and I'm going to call this waiting waiting 48 hours. So when I set a ticket like you just saw me do, I'm waiting for the customer for something. I've set the ticket status to waiting on customer. So in my conditions, I'm going to say if the ticket status is waiting on customer, and definitely look through all of these. These are different things that can be true about a ticket. But for my example, I'm going to say is not updated in 48 hours. What do I want to do? Well, I want to email that customer. You can see here all the actions that we can take. And I'm going to say this ticket number, here's a tag, just FYI, there are more tags down here you can use. This ticket is waiting for a response. So if I leave this automation exactly as it is, what's going to happen is at the point, so we run our ticket automations about every hour. So at the point that this is true, so that ticket is waiting on customer and it's been over 48 hours, I'm going to send them an email. Now, I just said that our ticket automations run every hour. So what that means is it's going to happen once, and an hour from now, if they have not responded, they're going to get this email again. We will do an automation 10 times when it's true before we give up. So this could be anything. In this case, it's this ticket. But you're like, wait a minute, I want to send them one email to nudge them. I don't need them to get an email every hour. So a couple of things that we can do to mitigate that is we can add in an additional action here. So one of the things is we can click update ticket. And what this does is it doesn't change the ticket really. It just says it's been updated. So it restarts this clock. So then if we don't hear from them in another 48 hours, they'll get this email again. I would leave this as is. And then I would maybe I would save this and then maybe create another one that says something like, if ticket status is this, sorry, I already got that. And what I saw one customer do is they had one for 48 hours and then they had another one for like 72 hours. And it then closed the ticket. They didn't add in this update. So they had one. So they had one that was set to email at 42 hours and then changed to resolved. Then they resolved it after a certain amount of time. So you can use things like in tandem with each other. So that especially this is a great one because especially if you're waiting for somebody, you don't want to be waiting forever. And you definitely don't want to be going into that ticket every day and being like, hey, can I get that thing? Hey, can I get that thing? So that's ticket automations. Let's head over to our admin. We're going to go to more and admin. And we're going to scroll down to our invoice preferences down here. Again, not going to go through all of these, but some things that I really want you to be aware of is the last invoice number. If you have an external accounting integration like QuickBooks or Xero, if you've been using it for a while, but you have just been recently starting with Syncro, you're going to want to be wary of making sure that whatever your last invoice number is here is not something that's going to be duplicated based on what you already have in your accounting integration. So for example, if your accounting integration has a bunch of stuff between 1,000 and 2,000, you're not going to want to come in here and put in 1,000 because your next invoice in Syncro is going to be 1,001, and you're going to get an error that says that that invoice number already exists in QuickBooks or whatever your accounting integration is. To mitigate that and to also help you out, I've seen a lot of people use a numbering convention similar to this. The year, the month, and then depending on kind of how many invoices you have, if you're never going to have more than 100 invoices in a month, you can stick to 2 digits. Or if you're going to have more than that, you may want to go 3 digits. That way, the next invoice that's created is going to be 2107000001. What this does is this kind of ensures that you're never going to have duplicate numbers in your accounting integration. But the other thing it does is it allows you to see the year and month that an invoice was created. We don't have a way to do like a date and time as well. But then if you do the numbering like this, then you come in and on August 1st, you update this to this. That way in August, everything then has the year, month, and then a number in it. I've seen a lot of people use this, and it really is, it just kind of helps you see at a glance when a ticket is, or when an invoice is created. It also helps it so that you don't get duplicates in your accounting integration. The other thing I want to show you here is retry failed payments for recurring invoices. If you are going to have people automatically paying recurring invoices off of the recurring invoices that we're going to look at here in a moment, and you have this setting, just a little FYI, if they have it to automatically pay and it fails, a ticket will get created for them. If you have this setting to retry, every time it retries, it'll create a new ticket. So it's not going to happen all that often, but you might come in one morning and be like, why are there 4 tickets for this one customer? And it's maybe because you have this setting in tandem with that other setting, and we just keep creating the ticket for the failed payment. So just something to be aware of. And again, definitely come in here, check these out, set this up the way that you need it for your environment. We looked at creating invoices from tickets, but maybe you have a brick and mortar and you just have somebody, they walked in and they're like, hey, my phone won't boot, and you plug it in and it just needed to be charged. So you just need to charge them for a little bit of labor. You can come in here, you're going to create a new invoice. By default, there is in Syncro a walk-in customer. If you've deleted that or you want to call it something different, go ahead and create a customer for those people that you don't, they're not regular customers, but you will need to be able to charge for them. I don't have one of those, and maybe the person standing in front of me is somebody that I do know. And so I'm just going to grab their customer information and create a new invoice for them. I'm going to come in here, and here's where that thing that I showed you that I was talking about is, so Storsley Family Pictures has a ticket out there with some charges on it. And Syncro is saying, hey, there are these other charges. Do you also want to add this to this invoice? So maybe I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, hey, did you know you have this other charge here from ticket 1020 for $200? And they're like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. I want to pay for that too. So I'm going to add this to my invoice. And I'm going to add in some labor because I'm like that. And it says we're just going to charge them for 15 minutes of labor. And so I get ready. I'm like, okay, so your new total is $246.38. And I'm going to come up here. I'm going to take a payment. And again, Syncro is going to try to help. And we're going to be like, hey, so we had those other tickets that had charges on them. We wanted to add to the invoice. Now Syncro's like, but there are other invoices out there that have not been paid. So I'm like, hey, I have these other 2 from these other invoices. Do you want to pay for those too? And they're like, no, let me just pay for what I got. So I'm just going to leave this as is. I'm going to come over here and use my little test thing. Oops, wrong way. And take payment. And we come back, and here's my invoice. I'll show you. So there's this invoice, and now I have this payment down here. If you have questions about a payment, especially on a credit card, I encourage you to come into here. You can view the history and kind of see what happened going on here. You also have this set of parameters. This is basically the communication with the credit card company. So if you have any questions about the payment itself, definitely come in here and take a look at this. So that's creating an invoice and taking a payment, but maybe you have somebody that you have a recurring payment type with or some kind of contract, you can set up a recurring invoice. So to do that, we're going to head over to our invoices, and we're going to go into our invoice modules over here and recurring invoices. And I'm going to create a new schedule. For my example, I'm going to pick my Haven PD because I know they have a lot of good information. And so let's say for today's conversation, I'm going to start billing Haven. I told you about it earlier. I have an agreement with them that if they pay for 10 hours of prepaid labor, I'll give them a discount on that. So we're going to do Haven's monthly prepaid. And so I want to do this monthly. So I can set this to whatever interval we want. So I'm going to do monthly. Whatever date I pick at the next run, if I'm doing monthly, it'll do that date going forward. So if I pick the first, it'll run on the first of every month. If I pick the last day of the month, I can select this. So it's not doing it on the 31st because lots of months don't have the 31st, but it'll do it on the last day. Then kind of depending on how you're setting things up, you can charge in arrears or in advance. Definitely look into that if that's something that you want to look at. I'm going to be doing an advance of the period starts the day of the invoice creation. Then what's the name of the invoice itself? So this is what the customer is going to be seeing. Maybe I want something a little bit more. This is what I'm going to see, so I know which invoice it is, but this is what they're going to see. So I want a reminder for them that they're getting a discount. I can add in an employee for commissions if I'm going to be doing that. You can have multiple invoice templates, so you can decide which one you want for this invoice. You can add in terms if you like, any kind of memo. We're not going to look at all of these settings, but I want you to be aware of this one here. This is very useful. So even though this scheduled template for recurring invoices is going to be for prepaid labor, I also want to add in any ticket charges that they have from tickets that have not been charged yet. If you're going to do this, my suggestion is that you only do it for resolved tickets. And really, that to me, that just makes sense. If I tell it for every different kind, and there's a ticket that's maybe new or waiting on customer, and I charge for anything on that ticket, the customer could come back and be like, why are you charging me for this? We're still working on it. So if you're going to use this, and if you're going to have a lot of activity with customers, I would definitely suggest adding it in. Only do those things that are resolved. The next setting here is the clear and reset prepaid hours. So as an example, I'm adding in 10 prepaid hours on this recurring invoice. If last month, say they used 8 of those hours, but there are 2 left, do I want to add these new 10 hours, or do I want to clear what's existing and start fresh? So you can either add to or clear it. Because I'm giving them a discount, if I change the price of those labor hours in my product for that labor, do I want to let those customers keep the discount they have, or do I want to update the price to the new price that I put on that labor? You can see that setting there. And then I might have this set up and it's run a few times. I don't want to delete it. Maybe they're like, you know what, I can't afford your services for a little bit. Can we pause for a few months? I don't want to delete this and then rewrite it when they come back. I can just pause this. This also makes sure that I have the history of this recurrence. Then here's that auto charge credit card on file. This is that one that I suggested that you don't use this and retry, because you can get a lot of noisy tickets if their auto charge fails. So now that I've set all that up, I am going to create my schedule. And now it brings me right back. And now I'm going to add some line items. So the first line item I'm going to add is a standard line item. And I've got a product here for prepaid labor. So I'm going to give them 10 hours of prepaid labor. My normal price for prepaid labor is $200 an hour, but I'm going to give them a discount. And now I'm going to add this line item, and we'll come down here and we'll see that that line item is here. Because I told it this. Let me update this. If you tell it to keep it in line, even though this says if they change, really what this means is keep prices in line with products. So if you enable this, it's going to make the price stay whatever the price is. The last thing on here I want to show you for today is that, so I told you that if you enable one of your contacts or customers to have remote access, again, you and your team get it free. We charge you $5 per contact. If you add in your customers, you can pass that pricing on to your customer. And you do that by adding in the remote access contact counter. What do we want to call the line? What do we want on the line item itself? Syncro does try to do a count for me. It's like, is this right? How much do I want to charge them? Maybe I just want to pass on the $5 charge that I'm being charged, or maybe because I'm going to have to set it up and probably do some troubleshooting with them, I want to add in a couple bucks. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to add it to the template, and now you'll see I have two line items. So every month when this runs, it's going to start off with 10 hours of discounted prepaid labor, and Syncro is going to count the amount of contacts that are on that customer and charge for that. So that's how to set up a recurring invoice. And something to just note, I'm going to come back into my recurring invoice settings. And I have this old one here and I keep it here because I want to show you that as those run, it creates a history here. So you can come in here and you can be like, oh, here are all of the invoices that were created off of this recurring invoice. And if I open one of those up, you'll know it's from a recurring invoice because it has this icon. If you haven't done so already, I highly suggest that you join either our Facebook group and/or our Reddit users group. These are where users can chat with each other. Syncro users are super helpful, really vocal. Definitely hop into one or the other of those groups and just start a conversation. They're really helpful around, especially if you're like, so I know Syncro doesn't do this thing. Does anybody found a different way to get that done? Because I need it to do this other thing. Users are happy to help with those things. If after this you have questions or you get stuck on anything or something's not behaving the way that you think it should, go ahead and reach out to the support team at help@syncromsp.com, and the support team will be happy to help with any of those additional questions.